Your seat's outside, with the dogs. That's what my brother said last Christmas, while carving the ham, like it was any other holiday. No one laughed. No one said my name. There I was, standing with a gift in my hands, watching Claire sit where I used to. Mom avoided my eyes. The seat I once filled was gone, and nobody noticed. That's when I knew. It wasn't just a mistake. I'd been quietly erased, so I did what none of them expected. I placed a box on the table and said, "Check under your plate." If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, comment 1. If not, you're lucky. Drop a 0 because sometimes silence doesn't mean surrender. It means you're done begging to be seen. There was a seat for everyone, except me. The smell of pine and cinnamon wafted through the front hallway as I stepped inside, boots damp from the snow. Laughter spilled from the dining room, soft, mingling with the chime of glasses and the low hum of holiday music. I stood quietly, a small brown paper-wrapped gift in my hand. My coat still clung to me like a shield. No one had offered to take it. No one had even noticed I was there. I peeked into the dining room, heart thumping in that familiar, anxious rhythm I hadn't outgrown, even after all these years. The table was a picture from some glossy magazine, crystal goblets shimmering, polished cutlery perfectly arranged. A garland of pine cones ran down the center, dotted with red berries and fake snow. Name cards, each in Mom's looping cursive, sat neatly atop every plate. Every plate except one. Mine. I took a step closer, trying to make it into existence. Maybe it had fallen. Maybe it was tucked underneath the napkin. There simply wasn't a seat for me. I used to set that table. Now I stood there like a stranger with a wrapped gift no one asked for. Claire sat in the chair I always used to take. The one near the window, where Dad used to nudge my foot during grace, when I'd start fidgeting. She had Mom's old scarf wrapped snugly around her neck, the one I thought Mom had misplaced years ago. Her laughter mingled with Graham's deep voice. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could see the ease in his posture, the way he leaned back like he owned the room. "Mom?" I asked softly, stepping just inside the frame of the doorway. "Did you forget me?" She didn't look up from the tray of sweet potatoes she was adjusting, her hands fussing with parsley that didn't need moving. "We weren't sure you'd be coming," she said. My fingers curled tighter around the gift. "But I said I would." Graham picked up the carving knife and sliced into the ham with ceremonial flair. Without looking at me, he said, "Your seat's outside." "With the dogs?" The room went still. No one laughed. No one gasped. Just the gentle clink of Claire adjusting her spoon. I waited for someone to say it was a joke, that they'd just forgotten, that a chair would be pulled up in seconds. But no one moved. And I knew, in that moment, it wasn't about forgetfulness. It was about erasure. The gift in my hand felt suddenly too heavy, like it had turned to stone. I stepped forward and placed it gently in front of Graham's plate. "Check under your plate," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't look up. I turned and walked back through the hallway. The warmth of the house gave way to the sting of winter the moment I opened the front door. Snowflakes landed on my lashes, melted into the crease of my scarf. I paused on the porch, not ready to descend the steps just yet. Across the yard, the fence was still the same, slightly crooked on the south side, where Dad and I once tried to fix it, but ended up laughing instead when we both dropped the hammer. A memory snuck in, uninvited but welcome. I was 8. It was Christmas, and I had knocked over the cranberry sauce, spilling it across the table and onto Mom's white runner. I had burst into tears, humiliated. Dad had leaned over, ruffled my hair, and whispered, "No meal's perfect without a mess." Then he'd winked and mopped it up himself, humming carols under his breath. I hadn't thought of that moment in years. And now, standing here with the snow crunching beneath my boots, I realized something. That seat at the table wasn't just about dinner. It was about belonging. The wind picked up, biting at my cheeks, but I didn't go to my car right away. Through the frosted window, I could see the candles flickering on the table, casting long golden shadows on the walls. I remembered being little and asking Dad why we always used real candles instead of the electric kind. "Because light should breathe," he'd said. Inside, the table was glowing with life, but none of it touched me. I stepped off the porch, crunching into the fresh layer of snow. The garden path, once lined with tulips Dad had planted, now lay buried. The old lawn chair still sat under the elm tree, tilted from years of wind, its cushion long since faded. I passed the kitchen window and caught a glimpse of Mom's profile, rigid, unreadable, as she poured wine into Claire's glass. For a second, I imagined her turning, seeing me out there, and calling me back in. But the curtain fell, and the moment passed. Another memory came, Dad and I sitting by the fireplace with mugs of cocoa, his hands wrapped around mine because mine were always cold. He had this way of making silence feel safe. Now silence only reminded me of absence. I walked toward my car, but before reaching it, I turned once more to the house. I had always thought coming home would fix something, or prove something, that if I just kept showing up, they'd see me again. But maybe I'd been chasing a ghost of a family that no longer existed. Or maybe it never did. I step into the cold night, wondering how long I've been erased and why I kept coming back. We used to hang ornaments with stories. Now the tree looked like it came from a magazine, and none of those stories were mine. It used to be chaos. Real, beautiful chaos. Graham and I would dive into the old storage bin, covered in cobwebs, fighting over who got to hang the cracked glass reindeer first. It had a chip on the antler, thanks to me. I'd dropped it one year trying to balance on the ottoman in my fuzzy socks. He cried like it was his best friend, even though he'd called it ugly the year before. Dad had walked in, greased his fingers from changing the oil, and just laughed. "It's not Christmas until something breaks," he'd said, handing me the super glue. That reindeer went up every year after that, glued and a little crooked, like us. Now, standing in the living room this year, the tree looked like something out of a high-end catalog. All silver and blue, matching ribbons spiraled down like someone had watched a YouTube tutorial. There was no reindeer, no construction paper angels, no wonky clay handprints labeled Marin age 6. It was perfect and lifeless. I scanned the mantel. Our stockings used to hang there. Dad's was the biggest, stretched from years of overstuffing. Mine was red with a white felt M stitched on it, just a little crooked. It was gone. Only 3 hung now. Graham, Mom, Claire. She wasn't in the childhood photos. She wasn't there in the Sunday dinners when Mom burned the pie and Dad pretended not to notice. She hadn't fought over the TV remote with Graham or cried when we moved Dad's recliner because it messed up the living room energy. But now, her face was in every new photo, at the pumpkin patch, at the garden center, holding the dog I'd begged for when I was 12. I blinked, hard. Back then, Dad had been the gravity. We orbited around him, even in silence. His newspaper would rustle as he sat in his favorite chair, reading aloud the horoscopes with mock seriousness. "Marin," he'd said once, peeking over the top of the paper, "says here you're going to meet a tall, dark stranger today. Probably just the vacuum cleaner." I'd rolled my eyes, but I'd smiled for hours after. Now the living room was filled with different energy, precise, polished, curated. Mom was humming Silent Night in the kitchen, her voice trailing off before the second verse. That used to be our song. She and I would sing it while washing dishes, turning the kitchen into a stage with spatulas for microphones. I stepped closer to the tree and reached out, fingers hovering over a shiny glass bauble. It reflected my face in a warped, disjointed way. I pulled my hand back. I didn't belong here, not in this perfect snapshot. Over the years, the changes had come slowly. A missed phone call, then a holiday too busy to host. One year, I sent plane tickets for everyone to come visit me. No one used them. No one even called to say why. I'd ask Mom if everything was okay, and she'd sigh. Tired, distant. "It's easier when Graham handles things," she'd say. Or worse, "Don't stir things up, Marin." At first, I thought I was imagining it. The missed invites, the curt texts, the way conversations skipped over me, like I was background noise. But now, staring at a tree with no memories of me, it all felt intentional. Not cruel, just convenient. Have you ever felt like your absence made things easier for the people you love? Like your presence was just a disruption to their picture-perfect world? If you've been quietly pushed aside by your own family, comment on the number 5. Let's see what happened next. Being left out didn't always come with slamming doors or shouting matches. Sometimes it was in the soft closing of a photo album or the way a gift you sent never made it to the mantle. I was being edited out, like a draft someone no longer needed. And still, every year, I sent cards with handwritten notes. Little ornaments I found at farmers markets. A handmade calendar with old family photos. Once, I mailed Mom a mug that said, "World's Coziest Matriarch." I never saw it again. There's a kind of grief that doesn't make noise. It lives in the soft spaces, like between the lines of a holiday card where your name is missing, or in the silence that follows a cheerful, "Merry Christmas." You leave on voicemail, never returned. One memory clung to me as I stood there. It was a Sunday dinner years ago, the kind where the TV was always too loud and something in the oven was always burning. Dad sat in his recliner, reading the paper upside down to make us laugh, while Graham and I argued over the remote. Mom, flustered but trying to hide her smile, pulled a blackened pie from the oven and waved the smoke alarm with a dish towel. It was noisy, messy, and it was ours. That night, I spilled apple cider on the rug and cried. Dad had winked, handed me a paper towel, and said, "Nothing worth remembering ever happens clean." Now everything was clean. Pristine. Claire poured sparkling cider into etched glasses like she was born into the scene. Graham handed out gifts with the confidence of a host. And me, I was a guest, or worse, a ghost. And yet, I kept sending cards, gifts, plane tickets, hoping one year would be different. The cabinet stuck like it didn't want to give up the truth. But I tugged anyway. I hadn't planned on coming back, not to the house, not this soon. The sky over Redwood Hollow hung low and colorless, the kind that made everything look like a memory. I sat in my car too long, engine idling, hands still gripping the steering wheel like it might steer me away. But my key still worked. The door creaked open, reluctant, like the house knew it was me. Inside, the air smelled of lavender polish and stale silence. Everything was too clean. The furniture was staged, the mantel dustless, the throw pillows plumped like someone had read a guide on how to grieve properly. But none of it felt lived in. None of it felt like Dad. Except his study. I walked past the untouched living room and into the one space no one else bothered to change. The clock on the wall still ticked 10 minutes behind. His old army jacket hung on the coat hook. The faintest scent of wood glue and leather clung to the air. His toolbox sat under the shelf, just where it always was. My fingers brushed across the desk, stopping at the dent in the corner, where he once dropped a hammer. I didn't know what I was looking for, until I did. He once told me, during a Sunday afternoon fixing the backyard fence, that he hid something just in case. I was 16, sunburned, annoyed, and rolled my eyes at what I assumed was another one of his cryptic jokes. But he'd smiled, held up a dusty copy of Travels with Charlie, and said, "That book hides more than wanderlust." I thought he meant wisdom. Now, standing in his study, I spotted that same copy on the shelf. Spine cracked, a folded corner like a waving flag. I pulled it down. It opened too easily to the middle. Inside, taped to a yellowing page, was a key. My pulse kicked up. I knew what it opened. Behind the filing cabinet, tucked low beneath a drawer he once said never worked, was the wall safe. It clicked open with a soft reluctance. Inside, a stack of envelopes, a small black leather-bound notebook, and one crisp white envelope addressed in his slanted, careful handwriting. For Maureen. I sat down on the floor, the wood cool against my legs. My hands shook as I unfolded the letter. There was no preamble. "You never asked for anything. This house is yours. You earned it. If they try to say otherwise, remind them I knew better." No signature, just the certainty of his words. Beneath it, I found the will. His savings, the house, the land up north, all listed under my name, not shared, not contingent, mine. The heater hummed to life. The clock kept ticking behind me, 10 minutes too slow, as if even time had stalled to let me feel this. I pressed the letter to my chest and let myself cry. I hadn't since the funeral. Not properly, not freely. He saw me, in all the ways no one else had. I stayed seated there, on the study floor, longer than I should have. The world outside was beginning to dim. Through the window, I could just make out the bare trees casting long shadows across the snow-covered yard. A cardinal landed on the branch closest to the window and sat there a moment, puffed against the cold. Dad loved cardinals. He used to say they were reminders that someone you lost was visiting. I don't know if I believed that, but in that moment, I let myself pretend. I turned to the black notebook in the safe. It was filled with handwritten notes, receipts, appointment dates, and strange little sketches of furniture he meant to build but never did. In the margins were quotes, some from books, others from sermons he must have heard. But one, scribbled on the back page, stopped me cold. "She listens more than she speaks. That's how I know she's mine." It wasn't labeled, but I knew who he meant. My eyes blurred again. I leaned back against the bookshelf and thought of the summer we rebuilt the fence after the neighbor's maple came down in a storm. We worked for hours in silence. Him measuring twice, me hammering in crooked nails, he quietly straightened when I wasn't looking. That had always been our language, doing, not saying. Back then, I thought our connection was quiet because we didn't have much to say. Now I knew it was because we didn't need to. The light faded completely. I stood, knees creaking, and gently returned the book and will to the safe. I kept the letter. Down the hall, the living room still looked curated, like a stranger's idea of comfort. But in the study, in the soft hum of the heater, and the dusty scent of forgotten pages, I found the closest thing to being home. I turned off the light and whispered, "See you soon," unsure if I meant Dad or the version of me I thought I'd lost here. I pressed the letter to my chest and whisper, "Okay, Dad." I didn't need pretty wrapping paper. Truth doesn't need a bow. The box sat on the kitchen table like it had a pulse. I hadn't meant to start wrapping it tonight, but something about the quiet, soft hum of the fridge, rustle of wind through the balcony blinds, made the stillness feel like permission. My apartment was small, a one-bedroom tucked above a laundromat, but tonight it felt sacred. Dad's letter lay open beside me, the paper curled slightly at the edges. I had read it enough times to memorize every word, but still, my eyes traced them again. You never asked for anything. This house is yours. The simplicity undid me each time. I printed a copy of the will earlier in the day. Heavy paper, like something from a notary's desk. I folded it cleanly in thirds, smoothed it with the side of my palm. Then the letter. Then the photo. Me and Dad by the fence, my arm around his waist, both of us sunburnt and smiling like we'd earned something. I found an old cardboard box in the closet, the kind that once held Christmas ornaments I never put up anymore. I lined it with a dish towel for padding, placed the documents gently inside. I wrapped the box in plain brown paper. No patterns, no bows, just twine from a kitchen drawer, tied in a looped knot. I wrote in block letters, with my oldest fountain pen, "For the family." Then I made cocoa, the way Dad liked it. Too much cinnamon. I sat at the table, both hands cupped around my chipped holly mug. It had a crack running through the handle, a long, thin fracture that never quite split it in two. Some things, I thought, still hold warmth, even broken. I thought of Claire. Not in anger, but in clarity. The way she wore Mom's scarf, the way she laughed at stories she wasn't there for. It wasn't her fault, not entirely. She just slipped into the space where I'd once stood. Easy to do when no one stops you. And Graham? He used to cry when I dropped the glass reindeer ornament. He once gave me the last piece of fudge and whispered, "You're not allowed to die." We were kids. I wonder what changed, or if he just learned silence from the rest of them. I pulled out my suitcase and packed light. A change of clothes. A coat. The box rode on top of everything else, like a passenger. I booked the flight for the morning. Christmas Eve. No one would be expecting me, not anymore. But this wasn't about showing up. This was about showing them. Have you ever chosen to speak the truth, not to hurt, but to heal? If you've ever carried the weight of silence until it nearly broke you, drop a number 9 in the comments. Now, let's see what came of it. As I zipped the suitcase, I paused to look around my apartment. The little table tree blinked blue and red in the corner. My coat hung by the door. It was all simple, sparse, but mine. I didn't feel anger, I felt weight. But for once, it wasn't mine alone to carry. I stepped onto the balcony for air. The wind bit at my cheeks. Somewhere, carolers practiced off-key, laughter drifting from an open window. My hands tightened around the railing. The truth doesn't need wrapping paper, I thought, but it deserved to be delivered. I looked back inside. The box sat quietly on the table, wrapped, waiting. I thought about calling someone, Graham, even Mom. But what would I say? That I found the will? That Dad left it to me and not them? That he saw something they didn't? The truth wasn't a bomb. It wasn't meant to blow things up. But it had weight, and weight shifts things. I needed them to feel it, not to punish, but to wake up. I took a pen and a scrap of paper and wrote a single sentence. This is not about inheritance. It's about being remembered. I slipped it under the twine, between the folds of the paper. A second note, invisible until someone cared enough to look closely. I wandered the apartment, running my fingers along the edges of shelves and books I hadn't opened in years. My eyes landed on a tiny carved box Dad gave me when I graduated. Inside were old coins, a dried flower from prom, a keychain from a gas station halfway to nowhere. And under all of it, a note I hadn't read in ages. Make space for yourself, kid. The world won't. I smiled. I hadn't listened then, but now, maybe I was trying. I returned to the table. The box was still there, still waiting. And for the first time since he died, I didn't feel lost. I felt guided. I turned out the lights, leaving only the glow of the tree. It blinked steady, like a heartbeat. Tomorrow I will fly, and whatever came next, I'd carry the weight. But not alone, not anymore. I landed in Pennsylvania on Christmas Eve, and I still have Dad's key. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just showed up, with something heavier than rage. Snow crunched under my boots as I stepped onto the porch. The wreath on the door was the same one from last year, just a little more faded, a little more brittle. I knocked once, out of habit, then opened the door. No one looked up at first. The house was filled with warm light, clinking glasses, and the soft hum of conversation. The smell of roasted ham and cinnamon drifted through the hallway. The same fireplace crackled in the corner. The same picture frames lined the mantel, except my photo was missing. I moved down the hallway slowly, the box tucked under my arm, steadying it like something sacred. The dining room came into view. Long table, pristine white cloth, candles flickering in their holders. Every plate had a name card, every seat taken, every one but mine. Mom sat near the end, smiling at something Claire said. Claire, with her polished nails and knowing glance. And Graham. Graham sat at the head, laughing, head thrown back like nothing had ever been lost. My breath caught. I stepped into the room. Chairs squeaked. Forks paused midair. Mom blinked. Claire stiffened, but Graham just smirked. Marin, he said, as if my name tasted like old gum. Didn't know you RSV'd? I walked to the center of the table and placed the box down. It's for the family, I said, voice level. Graham leaned forward. What is this? Check under your plate, I said. There was a pause. He looked down, lifted the charger plate, and there, resting against the linen napkin, was the brass key. Claire tilted her head. Is it a gift? I looked her in the eye. Number, it's what you replaced. The room went silent, the kind of silence that buzzes. I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard a chair scrape sharply against the floor. Then a voice. Mom's, confused, afraid. Claire whispering. Graham saying something low and sharp. But I didn't turn around, not this time. The door closed behind me with a quiet click. Outside, the air smelled like pine and smoke. I walked to the car, unlocked it, slid into the driver's seat. My hands were steady. I didn't tremble. I didn't cry. I just sat there, feeling the stillness settle into my bones. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like I was running away. It felt like I was free. I remembered the last time Dad hosted Christmas. He stood, glass raised, and said, "This table stays honest." His voice was rough, his hands blackened with stove soot, but his eyes were clear. He meant it. And maybe that honesty was buried for a while. But tonight, it came back. I sat there, breathing in the cold. My fingers traced the ridges of the steering wheel, though I made no move to start the engine. I wasn't in a rush. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't on anyone's schedule but my own. Inside, I imagined the voices climbing, forks clattering against plates, Mom calling for calm, Graham raising his voice to cover his discomfort. Claire would try to smooth things over with her usual syrupy composure. But the truth didn't care about manners. It sat in that box, between the stuffing and the cranberry sauce, disrupting the illusion. I thought of Dad again. Not the quiet man he became near the end, but the one who coached me on how to patch drywall, who taught me to drive by letting me take the truck through the pasture. He used to hum when he was thinking, low, tuneless, like a motor settling. I hummed now, almost unconsciously, and the sound brought a kind of ache. A car pulled up across the street, headlights brushing the porch. I ducked slightly, instinctively. Then I laughed. What was I hiding from? I hadn't done anything wrong. I had delivered what was mine to give. The key, they wouldn't understand it at first, maybe not even by New Year's. But eventually, someone would open the study door, pull down that dusty copy of Travels with Charlie, and see the hollowed-out space where the key had once been. And they'd know. He planned this. He trusted me. The ache in my chest softened. Not gone, but quieter. I looked down and realized I was still holding the extra note, the one I'd almost included. I unfolded it. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing to stop bleeding. I folded it again and slid it into the glove box. Maybe I'd never need to give it. Maybe I'd write something else next year. Christmas lights blinked along the gutters of the house. From here, the whole scene looked peaceful, like a postcard. But I knew better. And still, I hoped. Hope was the oddest thing. Not loud, just stubborn. I turned the key in the ignition, but didn't pull away yet. I just let the heater fill the car, slowly, like a breath returning. Inside that house, they'd pick apart the gift like a crime scene. But it wasn't for them to understand. Not tonight. It was enough that I had shown up, uninvited and unwavering. Enough that I didn't raise my voice. Enough that I left my silence and the truth on the table. I sit in the car. For once, no trembling. Just stillness. They didn't hang the photo in the living room, but they didn't throw it away either. After the flight back to Austin, the silence was welcome. No phone calls, no messages. At least, not at first. I returned to my quiet apartment, the twine-wrapped box now empty on the kitchen table. The envelope from Dad was still tucked into the drawer near the sink. I didn't need to say anything at that dinner. The truth had unwrapped itself. The first call came 2 days later. Mom. I let it ring. She left a voicemail. Just call me back if you want. Her voice was hesitant, smaller than I remembered. I didn't return the call. The second message came the next morning. We made mistakes, she said this time. I know that. I waited before answering, finally picking up on the third ring that evening. She was quiet on the line. I could hear her breathing, hear the hum of the old heater in the background. You were always good at keeping the peace, she said. I let the silence hang between us, then answered, calm. I was always there. You just lived easier when I wasn't. She didn't argue. Maybe for once she couldn't. Graham showed up 3 days later, at my office, unannounced. My assistant told him I was in a meeting, which wasn't a lie. I watched him from the security feed, standing awkwardly in the lobby, holding a paper bag like it might fix something. He didn't wait long. Claire didn't call. She sent an emoji, something vaguely neutral, a leaf or a wave. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. That night, I pulled out the photo of me and Dad. By the fence we mended together, sunburnt and squinting. I slipped it into an envelope, sealed it, and mailed it to the house in Redwood Hollow. No return address. I don't know who opened it. I don't care. A week passed. I returned to my routines. Cocoa in the chipped holly mug, walks by the river, work, sleep, small quiets. Then Ruth, our old neighbor, texted. Thought you'd want to see this? There it was. A photograph attached to her message. A picture of the old shed out back. Tacked to the wall, just above Dad's dusty workbench, was the photo I'd sent. No frame, no caption. Just there. I stared at the image a long time. They didn't say sorry, but they remembered, and they didn't dare throw it away. The day after Ruth's message, I walked into my favorite bookstore on South Congress. The same clerk still rang the bell when someone entered. It smelled like cedar and old pages. I wasn't looking for anything, but my hands drifted toward the travel section, toward Travels with Charlie. I pulled it from the shelf and ran my fingers over the familiar spine. For a second, I could almost hear Dad's voice, see him sitting cross-legged in the shed, oil on his jeans, humming to no one. That photo on the wall, it wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was something like truth, left where only the brave or the curious would find it. Just like he used to hide things in plain sight. I walked home slowly, past windows filled with string lights and paper stars. People were laughing inside, sharing meals. I didn't envy them. I didn't feel bitter. I felt full, like there was finally enough space for me to just be. When I got back, I pulled out the small box where I kept letters. I added the printout Ruth had sent. Then, I folded one of Dad's old notes into the lid of the box. It read, "Fix what you can. Let go of what you can't." Later, I sat with Coco, cradling the holly mug in both hands. The chip was wider this year. I ran my thumb over it and smiled. Some things hold on, even when they're cracked. For a moment, I imagined next Christmas. Not at their table, not waiting for a name card, maybe with friends, maybe alone, but not erased. Dad once told me, "You don't need to win to be right. You just need to be true." I used to think being right meant standing up, speaking out, proving something. But sometimes, being true is just staying still, letting the storm pass, letting the photo hang on a shed wall in quiet defiance. I still drink from that holy mug. It chips a little more each winter. I let it. Sometimes, I still see that photo in my mind, tacked quietly to the wall, not on display, but not discarded either. It reminds me that truth doesn't always need to be loud to endure. I've come to believe that acceptance isn't giving up. It's choosing peace when the fight no longer serves you. If my story stirred something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like to walk through more stories like this with me, feel free to subscribe. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until next time.